It's truly amazing, and I'm going to use this as a bragging point. I have before in previous summers, that you think the synagogue is closed during the months of July and August, and all you need to do is look into this room. We've had events, we continue to have events over the summer, so it's just beautiful to see that and to let Rabbi Stecker, who has his deserved rest, that we are not closed while he is away. Today, I'd like us to remember the name Emma Rothstein. Who was Emma Rothstein? She is one of the 146 victims of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that occurred on March 25th, 1911. She died at the age of 21. And I'd like us to keep saying names like Emma Rothstein, so her memory and the memory of all of those 146 do not fade into oblivion. Based on the information online, Emma immigrated to the United States in 1909 at the age of 18. Guess she was too old for school, so she took a job at the factory, likely to support her family. At the factory, she has to work 52 hours per week, as we know, in sweatshop conditions where the doors are locked, and in the case of fire, you cannot get out. She has to work 9 hours Monday to Friday and 7 hours on Saturday. I'm assuming that Emma and most of the other Jews in that factory had observed Shabbat when they were back in the old country. But here in the United States, Emma and the others have no choice. They have to work on Saturday to survive. We rabbis are tempted to portray the Jews coming to America as the sad end of the traditional shtetl life, when everyone lived like the song tradition in Fiddler. The Jews of Anatevka and the Lower East Side were both poor, but the Jews of Anatevka could keep Shabbat and all the other traditions, at least we like to imagine. But when they came here to the United States to survive, and I made that argument last week, that it was for their successful survival, it was a given fact that Judaism and its adherents would never be the same. Was this a good or a bad development, as us rabbis ask? The answer really lies in how we respond and move on with these inevitable changes. Jewish immigration in the United States was a perfect storm that was going to permanently transform Judaism, whether we liked it or not. The Jews of America were thrust into an economy that is a 6-day work week, Monday through Saturday. And of course, there was plenty of anti-Semitism to go around, quiet, but also overt. And there was xenophobia, placing pressure on all the immigrants, Jewish and obviously not, to assimilate and not stick out too much. Judaism had to evolve if it was going to survive along with the Jews itself. And we tried different things, and a little like Darwinism, survival of the fittest, some of these attempts failed and others succeeded. One attempt that thankfully failed was that some rabbis chose to move the Sabbath worship to Sundays. They said, we're all off, we need a day of spiritual rest, everyone else is off, so let's make it on Sunday. Thankfully, it failed miserably. We know that Friday night and Shabbat holds too much meaning to get rid of it. So even as Jews were forced to work on Saturday, they would go to synagogue either on late Friday night after work or early Saturday morning before they had to go back to work. And thankfully, around the 1930s, the union movement and actually two rabbis, Chaim Mendes and Bernard Drachman, helped the country adapt, for the most part, a 5-day work week. And like biological evolution, diversity became the name of the game. We know that in the 20th century, the three major movements developed the Reform movement, the Conservative movement, modern Orthodoxy, and then of course we have the smaller groups of Jews, the Hasidic sects, and the smaller liberal groups like Reconstructionism. Charles Lieben, the sociologist of the 20th century, taught and had us vision Judaism as being an authentic but evolving core that is continuous with the past, but whose change is essential for the survival of Jews and Judaism into our day and into the future. In many ways, I'd like to see the Jewish diversity of today as the outer dressing around this internal core. And we need to let this core unite us and respectively give people the freedom to choose how they dress their Judaism. And yes, American individualism means that Jews will choose, some of them, to opt out entirely, especially if their parents have a weak connection to Judaism and are having trouble passing it on to the next generation. We are all, in essence, Jews by choice. We need to embrace this fact and not lament it. It is not the old country of Africa, of Iran, of Eastern Europe. Rabbi Ethan Tucker frames this as saying that we need to accept our Jewish observance, avodah, he calls it, service, avodah minahava. We need to accept it in love, not in any fear or coercion. He says that Jewish life in America plays out in an unpressurized cabin, and Jews have to put on their own oxygen masks, and then they can put on their children's oxygen masks. So how do we do that? We do that by modeling Judaism for ourselves and finding ways to love Judaism. The metaphor that I love to tell our bar mitzvah students is that we are all links in a chain, and our job is to mold the links of the next generation and help them join on to the chain that comes from our parents, our grandparents, great-grandparents, and beyond and beyond. We need to show ourselves and our children our love of Shabbat and holidays, our love for the land and state of Israel, and how Judaism teaches us to be kind and have chesed and justice for all. And yes, we need to verbally show and tell our children and our grandchildren our loving desire that they join onto this link and embrace and continue their Judaism. Their Judaism might be a little different than ours, but we have to embrace it and help them hold on at least to that inner core. And so I encourage us to be active Jews for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren. Show them how you make challah, light candles on Friday night, and how you outwardly support and volunteer for Jewish causes. Take them to Israel if you can. And of course, study, study, and study. Continue to learn Judaism. There is so much there because the rabbis teach us study leads to action. And I would say study leads to love, and we can love our Judaism. If you want a good film or book to read this summer, I suggest Chaim Potuk's The Chosen, even if you've read it before. Many of us know that Chaim Potuk was the quintessential Torah Umada Jew. I think he belonged to conservative synagogues, actually. He believed in Torah and Jewish tradition and the idea of Maddah, secular knowledge, and how we could have both together. And he embodies that in his book. What is the book The Chosen about? You have two high school kids, Danny and Reuben. Reuben is the son, the oldest son of the Hasidic rabbi who's supposed to go on and to lead the movement. But all Reuben wants to do is go to the library and soak up the secular studies. Danny is the son of the professor who's actually recommending books to Reuben. And Danny's growing up in the secular world, but he needs to be tied to the Talmud. Something is calling him to go back to that world more than perhaps his father can. And we actually see they kind of switch father figures in a little way. But we see through both of them that really to thrive as a Jew in America, we need both. We need what the old country brought to us, but we also need what this country has given us: freedom, the ability to grow, and yes, because the world is changing, to embrace modernity. Throughout the 20th century, there was a lot of critique or exploration. How do we pass Judaism on to the next generation, especially post-Holocaust? And there was a stream at that point, again through this Darwinism idea, that said we just need to tell the kids about the Holocaust. Never again, never again. That's 614th commandment, never forget. And yes, that is the 614th commandment now. But it can't just be the only thing. We have to show a positive way of Judaism. So in addition to remembering Emma Rothstein, we also this week remember Eva Eben, a congregant of our own who survived the Holocaust. And when I met her family, we were told that she has 22 grandchildren and 58 great-grandchildren. That is how Judaism survives to the next generation. And many of them are observant Jews in many different ways, because Eva and her husband gave to Magen David Adom and taught them to love Israel, to love Great Neck, to love Judaism. And so that is how we move on, Lador Vador, from one generation to the next generation, holding on to our traditional core and finding our way to dress and adorn Judaism. Shabbat Shalom.